What's up, guys? SpartanCat, and in today's Battlecats video, I'm ranking the Nekolugas on whether they're overrated, underrated, or if they're rated fairly by the Battlecats community. And being overrated or underrated doesn't make a unit good or bad. It just means that they're valued too highly or they're not valued enough by the Battlecats community. And if they're in the fairly rated tier, then that means that it's agreeable that a certain unit is good, average, or bad, or that many people know about a certain trait or characteristic the unit has. Or in other words, we can agree on a ranking together. But starting things off, and unfortunately, Luga is just not a good legend rare. It's unfortunate because I think Luga had a lot of potential, and if Luga even got a single trait to lock in on, I think Luga would be twice as good. But Luga really doesn't have any niche. Luga kind of reminds me of Mechabun because obviously Luga is better, but Mechabun, into his true form, doesn't have a niche. He just kind of rushes in. He has alright DPS. He has fast attacks, but the problem is he can't get enemies off his back, and he dies because he doesn't have a lot of health. And it's unfortunate, but I don't like to compare him like that, but he's just not that good. And another thing I kind of joke around with, I kind of say with his stats and everything, it's like your run wolf without range. I mean, it's unfortunate. Luga is immune to waves, has Omni Strike, is resistant to other things, but it doesn't really make up for it. Luga is an underwhelming rusher, and I would recommend using IDI, Awake Muhammad Cat, Yukimura, the Bullet Train, even Can. But yeah, he's outclassed Bally. And the namesake of this list, Nekoluga, is also fairly rated. And Nekoluga is an average Uber, in my opinion. Decent at what it does, which is knocking back, and in its true form, freezing all non-metal enemies with an area attack and long range. So, not bad. Kind of like a Sniper Cat and Cyberpunk built in, something like that. But the problem is survivability. And, with the survivability, if anything gets in the blind spot or approaches it and kills it, it takes a ton of time for it to come back on the field. So that's a big risk, but it does have purpose, especially in the beginning and some of the middle of the game because of the absurd amount of range it has. It does allow it to do a lot of stuff. So I'm going to put it in fairly rated, and also going in fairly rated is going to be Bikini Luga, and she's very bad. I don't have to elaborate too much on this, but if you have her, she's really just a meme by the Battlecats community. She really doesn't do a whole lot, and she's one of the worst units on this list. Moving on from that, we have Asiluga. And Asiluga, he isn't that bad, believe it or not. I know his name probably tells you otherwise, but Asiluga has a guaranteed chance of slowing enemies from afar, very afar. And that's pretty good. With area attack and everything, it's guaranteed. So kind of treat it like a Cyberpunk Cat, but that's where things get tricky because now you have Cyberpunk Cat to use, and it kind of mixes up the roles here. So Asiluga is competing with Cyberpunk, but instead of them having to rip each other's heads off for playing time, you could also use both of them. If you have enough money in the stage and you want a ton of control, then you could do that. You could stack him with Cyberpunk, and that's a pretty interesting combination. You get a couple of each of them on the field, and you're pretty much unstoppable. But that's if you could. I think he's an average Uber, and I'll put him in fairly rated. I think he is just all right. And as I said, he does compete with Cyberpunk, who tends to be the more viable option, especially since you could, he's just more applicable. He's a little cheaper, and I think he's better in my opinion. But they're both all right, and as I said, you could team them up, and it helps out. All right, next we have Kubalan Pasalan with the big long neck, and he, depending on which form, his evolved form, you can get 3 guaranteed wave attacks with guaranteed knockbacks, or in his true form, you can get 3 guaranteed critical hit wave attacks. So it depends if you want knockback or critical hits. But his problem with the critical hits is he doesn't really do damage. He has very little damage in DPS, so he's not going to be able to kill them. He's really just knocking metal back. But in his evolved form, I think there's a lot of usage for it because he gets to knock back enemies 3 times, and the wave makes it consistent. The wave reassures that he hits enemies. So I think that's pretty interesting. He has a strange niche. I'm going to put him in underrated, honestly. I think he's slept on a little bit, and his wave could be very useful. His critical hit, as much as I like it to work, he just doesn't do enough damage to clear enemies. But he could get you some breathing ground if that's what you're looking for against them. So, not horrible. Next, we have Tekoluga. And Tekoluga, if you don't know who he is, then you've been under a rock because this is Luffy. And I'm not going to, I don't know if I'm going to say he's overrated or fairly rated, but let's see. It's tough because he's really good, but I'll put him at fairly rated. And the problem with him, though, is single target attack. The good news is that if he hits the right enemy, they might be good as dead if he lands a critical hit. And, he's dubbed the boss killer by the Bobcats for a reason. It's because if he hits a boss in critical hits, it's insane amount of damage, and he could do very well. He's like a long-range Balrog with a long backswing and everything, but very powerful. Use him in the right scenario. Don't bring him in stages with hordes of enemies or hordes of peons or anything like that, because that will set you back a ton, and he won't get any value for you. But I think Luffy, ton of potential, live up to it by putting him in the right lineup. Moving on, we have Balaluga, and also on this list is the other Balaluga variant. I think Balaluga is underrated personally because I do have it, and Balaluga just sits by the base and freezes, and in its true form, weakens enemies as well. So 6 seconds of weakening, 3 seconds of freeze. So you're really only getting 3 seconds of freeze, 3 seconds of weaken after the freeze, but it's still effective and it's a nice boost. I prefer to have it rather than not, and very reliable at what it does, which is freezing and weakening enemies from afar. And it executes it well because it has more range than most of these units. And on top of that, the freeze and the weaken prevent the enemies from moving forward, whereas some of them might only slow them for a few seconds or knock them back and they move right back in. But the freeze and then the weaken, so the weaken prevents them from moving in, and the freeze stops them from doing anything altogether. So that's a good combination. And Balaluga's Bikini version is like the exact opposite. I'm gonna put it in fairly rated because people know it's bad, but they try to give her DPS, and it doesn't really work out. And yeah, it's just a whole mess. You don't give a unit where the first version has 11 DPS and try to give the next unit thousands of DPS. It doesn't work. The mechanics suck on it, and unfortunately, a failed attempt. And I know Shishilan, he's really been dogged on the last couple of years, and I'm going to add on to it because, as much as I like him, I think he's the second best Uber in the set behind Luffy. I know that could be a hot take, but the problem is 100 knockbacks. And there's going to be a lot of people in the Battlecats community that say 100 knockbacks. SpartanCat, you were just complaining about all these units having bad survivability. Why are you dissing on Shishilan? And the reason is 100 knockbacks. It's unnecessary, and every little flick is going to knock him back and interrupt his attack. But on the contrary, if you meat shield him super well and you play him in the right stage, he is absolutely like Godzilla. And it's nice that he can survive a lethal strike as well. So, if he gets obliterated by a boss, it does increase his survivability. So, to a person's point, that would be true. And as I said, he does a lot of damage. He's well protected. And he's like Bahamut. But another thing you got to look into is after he takes damage, he doubles his damage. And that makes him much more threatening. And as I said, all he needs is to be down at 99% health. So he destroys that. And he's also immune to waves. So he's great, but also he's only overrated because he spars with Luffy for that number one spot. And I do think Luffy's better, but in terms of stages with a ton of peons and everything, obviously Shishilan is a lot better because of the area attack and the ton of damage. But I do think it's pretty close between them. I do have to say Shishilan is overrated, though, unfortunately. And you know who's really not overrated? Nekoluga. And Nekoluga is just horrible. I'm sorry. Just the blind spot is huge and doesn't have enough DPS for what it does, and is one of the weakest Ubers in this game because of that. It just doesn't do anything efficiently. They try to give him DPS and everything, and as I said, he's just ineffective. And his big mustache really doesn't save him from anything because he just, oh man. Yeah, as I said, horrible survivability. His blind spot is absolutely huge. So he can't even hit anything that's within 400 range of him. So yeah, the range most enemies have, he really can't do anything with. And he's just, the multi-hit messes him up. His respawn time is well over 3 minutes. So if he dies, which he probably will, then it's bad. And yeah, really lanky time in between attacks. And after all that's said and done, he has less than 3,000 DPS with multi-hit, so that's atrocious. His really his only saving grace. That finally took me a while. It took me a while to say that, but he doesn't cost a whole ton. He costs about half of what the rest of the Ubers on his list cost, but it's because he's horrible. And I'm sorry, but he goes in fairly rated. We all know the sad tale of this. And you know who else goes in fairly rated? The guy right behind him. That's right, Papaluga. Do I have to talk about Papaluga? He's just a failure. The curse isn't 100% uptime. He has multi-hit. His survivability is horrible. And he's built like a very fragile, very, 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 very senile and old man. He is horrible. And as I said, he probably couldn't survive it if it goes through an acorn at his ribs. It would probably go through him like a bullet. It's unfortunate, but yeah, he's built like glass. And another pretty bad Uber, which at least has a niche that it could do decently well against, is Furaluga. And Furaluga is pretty decent at breaking barriers and piercing shields, so props for that. But the problem is it doesn't have any real immunity to any of these things, so you bring it in and it pretty much dies. And also it doesn't have a lot of damage or anything, so that's another problem. It's just a pure shield and barrier breaker, so if you're going to be in the barrier thing, then bring in a elemental pixie or something. Really no reason to bring in Furaluga. And for piercing shields, there are some other Ubers, but at least Furaluga has a bit of a niche there. So not downright atrocious, not the worst unit on this list, but yeah, probably second or third worst Uber behind Papaluga and another old man of Nobeluga. And yeah, last but not least is Luga, which I was the least familiar with, but Luga, not great, not bad. Does have mini surges. Good knockback. I don't know a whole lot about this Uber, but it seems all right to me. I wouldn't. It's definitely not the best or the worst of the set, but I will pull up some information real quickly, and it seems to be. Let's see. Yeah, so a 20% chance of knocking back enemies and a guaranteed level 6 mini search between 150 and 1050 range. So very inconsistent on that, but it does have almost 4000 base DPS from 710 range, and it doesn't have a blind spot, so that's actually pretty good. Pretty good sniper. Does not have a knockback, only 4 movement speed, and a recharge time of over 5 minutes. God, man, please. And I didn't mean to use the Lord's name in vain, but that is insane, man. Oh, man. 5.5 minute recharge. All right, so don't let Luga die. The survivability is horrible, but at the same time, Luga is capable of producing a lot of DPS thanks to the mini surge and good base stats. So keep that in mind. I'm going to actually say Luga is... I have no clue, honestly. I haven't heard a lot of people talk about Luga. Let me put it in underrated and see if this ages well. I think Luga could be good. But then it's starting to remind me of Cat God the Great. Jeez. You know what? Fairly rated. Let's put in fairly rated. All right. This is the Nekoluga tier list. I do think Shishilan's overrated. Arguably, Luffy's overrated too. I think Luffy's good, but, he has the reputation as the best on this list, and he does miss his attacks, but as I said, if he hits them, then, yeah, he's definitely the best on this list. And the rest of them, I don't think this is too controversial of a list, because there's a lot of really bad Ubers on this list that a lot of people agree on are horrible. It's the middle ones that I think people disagree with. But yeah, if you guys enjoyed the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. And yeah, leave your thoughts down below in the comment section. Anything you want to add, anything you agree with, disagree with, anything you want to leave down below, feel free to. Just remember to keep the comment section civil so we could all have a good time. But anyways, thank you for making it this far into the video. SpartanCat signing off, and I'll see you guys in my next Battlecats video. Peace.